Desertification is one of the world's biggest problems. More than 2 billion people live in desert or dry conditions. Desertification is land degradation that affects biological productivity as well as the livelihoods of millions of people. It is caused by a combination of human and natural factors that contribute to an unsustainable use of scarce natural resources. Combating desertification yields multiple local and global benefits and helps fight biodiversity loss and global climate change. Here is an image of the world's deserts. Areas with average rainfall less than 2/3 of the potential mean evapotranspiration rate are classified as drylands. Some 10 to 20% of drylands are already degraded. Deserts receive less than 10 inches of rain per year. Overgrazing, misuse of marginal lands, overuse of chemical fertilizers, overfarming, and mechanical compaction and improper till techniques are all harming arable land and creating new desert areas. Irrigation can also be problematic. Irrigation can also be responsible for soil contamination, salinization, erosion, and groundwater depletion. Drought is a major problem for many drylands. Droughts also contribute to aridification. Many droughts are caused by global warming and climate change. Global warming is a positive feedback mechanism responsible for the widespread climate change experienced in many regions of the globe. Many areas already dry are becoming drier as the Earth's mean temperature rises. While temperature rises, evaporation increases. Erosion is also hastened by the impact of storm systems that have been increasing in intensity. Land degradation, such as deforestation and conversion of rainforest, charcoal production, firewood harvesting, forest fires, acidification, natural resource extraction, and toxic spills all contribute to anthropogenic desertification. Population growth also strains the resources that are readily available, and poverty also increases land misuse, degradation, and harmful agricultural techniques. Another large factor is due to governmental neglect and negligence. Executive and legislative failure, misdirected research, inappropriate advising, financial and resource difficulties, and on the local level, lack of community support and participation all add to the ecological stressors that are turning many drylands into tomorrow's desert landscapes. The harmful effects of desertification are responsible for death, famine, food shortage, and biodiversity loss. The desertification process also lends itself to positive forcings, which drive further desertification. Floods are also problematic and facilitated by low vegetation cover, poor soil conditions, and low infiltration rates. Many lakes have been drying up all over the world. While now recovering only a few years ago, the Aral Sea had all but dried up, and Lake Chad had contracted to 1/3 its normal size. Deserts are also responsible for sandstorms and encroachment. Cities such as Beijing suffer from sandstorms that are so bad and persist for so long that they are classified as natural disasters. The Sahara Desert encroaches up to 6 kilometers per year, pushing many farmers and residents out of their homes. Deserts are also responsible for the mass migration, immigration, and displacement of millions. Desertification is a serious problem in Africa, especially in places such as the Sahara Desert, the Sahel, a massive dryland which lies south of the Sahara, the Horn of Africa, the Kalahari, and the Namib Desert in the south. 2/3 of the African continent consists of deserts or drylands, and 74% of its agricultural drylands are seriously or moderately degraded. The Sahara Desert encroaches southward at a rate of 0.6 kilometers per year, while areas prone to desertification or drought have almost doubled during the last 2 decades. The Middle East is nearly 66% desert, while most of the rest is considered arid. Nations such as Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, Oman, and Yemen have less resources than other nations and are more restrictive than other nations in need of assistance. While there are extensive frameworks and plans in place, their progress seems to be somewhat limited. In most countries, there is little they can do against an enormous sea of desert, save for mitigation techniques. According to the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, or UNCED, also known as the Rio Conference or Earth Summit, was a major United Nations conference held in Rio de Janeiro from June 3rd to June 14th in 1992. The Rio Conference resulted in the Agenda 21 framework that helped to establish the UNCCD, or the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. Agenda 21 was adopted in Paris on June 17, 1994, and entered into force in December of 1996. It is the first and only internationally legally binding framework set up to address the problem of desertification. The World Bank has for long been involved in helping countries fight desertification. Between 2001 and 2006, the bank committed $1.4 billion for projects in natural resources management, with $701 million specifically aimed at sustainable land management. We strongly recommend an international and holistic developmental agenda. The cases and countries addressed represent desertification on a global scale, so no two policy measures will be the same. International cooperation is fundamental to combating desertification, especially in areas where deserts are large and nations are small. As part of our holistic development plan, we recommend a three-tiered governmental approach. On the national scale, there are many alternatives to desertification. Through the implementation of sound governmental policy, much can be accomplished. Governments are urged to increase their fundraising efforts and to work with various NGOs, charities, and international organizations such as the World Bank, which can help establish productive investments. Diversifying commercial use can increase investments in renewable energies such as biogas, biomass, gasification, solar photovoltaic cells, and other natural sources. Profits made from these projects could then be used to combat desertification or other important projects. Incentives for science and technology, improved research and development, and the establishment of employment programs will help end poverty. Apart from executive action, legislative recommendations must also be considered. At the middle level, sustainable ecosystem management, as well as increasing capacities, planning management, and monitoring will help assist and coordinate with both national and local government. Decentralization programs will help to increase productivity at the local level. A developing nation with weak central power or form of enforcement may not be able to succinctly enforce federal programs. Instead, local or state-level methods such as community pressures spearheaded by international firms or local leaders and intellectuals may be more effective in bringing about visible change. Ecological and public programs should be created. Awareness and education campaigns, volunteer programs, sapling availability, incentives, and population reduction programs such as birth control and family planning are all essential to the health and well-being of the people. We also strongly recommend the introduction of afforestation as the single greatest means to combat global desertification. Full funding should be granted for the introduction of green belts and buffer zones, which will also preserve critical habitat and biodiversity. In the United States in 1933, President Theodore Roosevelt approved several measures known as the New Deal. With it, the Civilian Conservation Corps were formed. Roosevelt proposed to recruit thousands of unemployed young men to battle the erosion and destruction of the nation's natural resources. 3 billion trees were planted from 1933 to 1942. This was crucial, especially in states affected by the Dust Bowl. Reforestation was necessary to hold in water and soil and to serve as a windbreak to keep the enormous dust storms from burying homes in the Midwest. The Great Green Wall of China is to stretch 400 million hectares, which will cover more than 42% of China's landmass. The project began in 1978, and 3 years later, China's top legislative body passed a resolution to make it the duty of every citizen above the age of 11 to plant at least 3 poplar, eucalyptus, larch, or other saplings every year. Since the last decade, some 56 billion trees across China have been planted by its citizens. Al Gore has said China plants 2.5 times more trees every year than the rest of the world combined. He called the endeavor the largest tree planting program the world has ever seen. After afforestation, programs and investments in the fields of energy and agriculture will also be essential in the fight to combat desertification. It is reported that 10% of the energy created by the sun in the Sahara could power the entire world. Many deserts are rich in minerals, precious and rare metals, and many other non-metallic elements and compounds. The single greatest oil reserves in the world are found under the deserts of the Middle East. Endeavors such as these would require state approval and private or state-run excavation operations. Policy analysts would also be needed to ensure efficiency and to help prevent corruption. This will help to represent a capitalistic free market frame of reference where it is assumed that firms will be specified in certain areas and may provide better and cheaper policy analysis than governmental organizations. Funds garnered through projects can and should be used to help finance anti-desertification projects. Indigenous technical knowledge, seeds and sapling programs, and marketing of organic and cash crops, as well as modern irrigation and evaluation programs, revival of riparian areas along streams and rivers, and proper crop rotation and till techniques are all essential to establish healthy agricultural systems. Introduction of biochar would increase soil fertility and moisture retention and will last for thousands of years. Traditional and seawater greenhouses can be built. Seawater greenhouses use salt water to humidify and cool the air. Seawater is also evaporated through solar heating and distilled to produce fresh water. Inland mariculture, the farming of fish, shellfish, and seaweed, could provide income for many. If new agricultural areas are successful, federal taxes could be levied to help make further improvements to agriculture. We also recommend the implementation of other remediation techniques. In many areas, there is little that can be done except for keeping sand and uprooted plants from encroaching upon their farms and homes. Sand fences, windbreaks, and sand dune stabilization, as well as moisture harvesting techniques, can also be used. Boreholes, windmills, channeling, and placing small stone walls around the bases of trees will help to harvest or retain moisture.